If you produce house or electronic dance music in general, you might eventually want to buy some gear. But it's not always that easy to decide what to get or what not to get. And you might quickly run into some questions like, should you just get a MIDI controller to start things out, or do you definitely need analog gear? Well, I've kind of worked my way through many of those questions over the past couple of years. So I thought, why not share exactly what I have in my setup today and why I put things together the way that I did. So yeah, let's jump right in. So as you can see from up there, I have quite a few tools in my setup, but something that was actually really important to me is that they're all very accessible and easy to reach. So if I put my arm over here, I can reach all these MIDI controllers, I can reach the keyboard. All the stuff in front of me is quite accessible, and same is true for over here where I have my drum machine, and this is more of like the analog side of things where I have stuff in my rack. It's kind of everything within an arm's reach, right? And I started out making music or producing dance music just with a computer. So I'm kind of used to having everything close by and access to everything very quickly. And I wanted to keep that concept alive in a way. And the moment you move into the analog realm, you might end up with these racks and walls of synthesizers and different tools everywhere. And when I spent some time in setups like that, I realized that's not really for me. I have to be kind of close to the computer and be able to control everything together. And in order to make that happen, I also kind of had to pick certain tools which allow me a lot of flexibility. So overall, my philosophy or approach is kind of, I want to copy what's happening inside the box, but combine it with all the advantages of stuff that you can do outside the box. I mean, you can try playing an instrument like a piano or a guitar with a mouse. It's kind of impossible. And for me, machines and synthesizers, drum machines, grooveboxes are also instruments. And they're also kind of designed to be played with two hands and all your fingers. So if you have certain workflows which stay the same, you build up some muscle memory and you get to know a certain workflow and you internalize it, which opens up some more options for creativity and things like that. Sounds maybe a bit esoteric, but I really think it's that way. If you practice an instrument, any instrument, you kind of internalize certain movements and then you can get more complex over time. It's almost a bit cringy to say, but I got a bit inspired by people like, or videos about Steve Jobs, who, yes, I guess he was kind of an asshole and maybe didn't design even all of the stuff himself, but the stuff that was said in these videos sometimes resonated with me.
What's wrong with their user interfaces? Well, the problem with them is really sort of in the bottom 40 there. It's this stuff right here. They all have these keyboards that are there whether you need them or not to be there.
I realized, for example, in these big setups where you have so many different keyboards, that I don't necessarily need so many keyboards. Like the synthesizer up top is the thing that's interesting to me in a way. So in my setup, as you can see, I just have two keyboards. All the tools which I have here, in order to kind of be able to have a relatively small setup, they have to do several jobs, right? So let's take the machine drum UW, for example. This is a machine drum by Ableton. Has a drive in there, which means you can load a bunch of samples on there on top of the analog sounds that you can create with this. And it's also a great MIDI controller. So I kind of have this here because it's one cool workflow where I know exactly how to use it, but I connect it with a computer to trigger software like the Tal drum, or I use it to trigger stuff and rumblers that I have in my rack. Yeah, I might make an extra video just about how I use the machine drum. But yeah, let me know in the comments for which tool you might want to see an extra video. So over here, we have a desktop filter, which is the Moonwind MK2 by Yomox. This might actually go back because in here it gets a bit humid and the touchscreen screen starts acting up, and I wasn't completely happy with this tool overall. I might replace it with another desktop filter. Here, kind of as a centerpiece, I have the Launch Control XL3, which I recently upgraded because now it has a screen, it has a MIDI ports, it has encoders, which means you can map it to many things. Just a really useful thing overall. And then, of course, to control things, I have my Push 1. I was never much of a guy who would have like one tool, like a machine to do everything, like a workstation. That's why I have an old Push, because I just use the pads and start trigger clips, record stuff, and browse a bit through my projects. So that's what the push is for. To maybe stick with the MIDI controllers for a second, I just have a Novation Launch Key 49, which is also nice to just like a basic keyboard, and you can trigger some stuff here and there. Before I used a Novation Launchpad as well. Now it's not working that well together with the Ableton push, so I might actually sell it or something like this. And then before that, I had the older Launch Control XL MK2, which already back then was a nice tool, but didn't have the encoders and some less capabilities. I kept it for now, but because in a way, like having this MIDI section over here to control things is kind of fun. Oftentimes I do different things with this Launch Control than this one. So for now, it's kind of cool to have it. And then the Robotron Viper, which I'm going to get to in a second as well, which is also a MIDI controller. So over here, this is kind of the analog section, and it's not split up in these two sections because it was kind of fun or because it's a battle between digital and analog. It's more because out of convenience, because I have a USB hub over here. I kind of color coded them so I know how they are connected. I like to use short cables, so it kind of makes sense to have all the MIDI controllers close to the USB hub and not have cables going everywhere. So it was kind of out of convenience. So this is all MIDI controllers. And then in the analog section, as I said, Machine Drum, Moonwind. Then we have the Electribe SX, which is a really nice groove box, especially for house and 90s house and stuff like that. And once again, it also has this old quirky way to put samples on there, a smart media card, which is still really nice. Like you just have to get an adapter, and there's an online editor. So you don't actually have to load every single sample onto there and use your computer. There is an online editor now where you can basically control everything you have on this machine and put all the samples on there, put it onto the media card, and you're good to go. So this is really nice. Since I really like the workflow, it's really straightforward. You see everything and it has cool effects. I also use this as an external effect. So I also route audio into the Electribe and I can sequence that or use effects on that. That's kind of nice. So I needed a MIDI keyboard for all the synthesizers and ramplers and rack units that I have here. So as I said, I have the microKORG up here. If I wanted to work without a computer, I have a Mackie mixer over here. If you pull this out, you can see, okay, I have a Korg MS2000R, which is very similar to the microKORG, so I might interchange the microKORG eventually. It's almost the same unit, just here you have more controls. But since I already have a keyboard and I want to save some space and not have that many keyboards, I got the MS2000R version, because the MS2000 is much bigger actually and has not only more takes up more space to the side, but it also has the keyboard, where I was like, okay, that's more stuff that takes up space, that might break. So just using one keyboard to control other things seemed appealing to me. Next to that, I have my Apollo Twin, which is the interface I use kind of as a volume knob, because I like convenience, as you can tell. And my actual interface, like the motherboard of this operation, is my Arturia AudioFuse 16 rig, which has many nice inputs and outputs, and you can route everything very flexibly there. So this was kind of a nice fit for me, but it was kind of annoying to have this control button down here. And since I had the Apollo before, kind of nice to have it on this table thing and have a nice big knob for volume control. So I'm using ADAT to send the output into my Apollo, which is then going into my speakers, where I'm using the Focal Trio 6. Usually they're connected with a Focal Sub 12, which is still being repaired. So it's kind of a long story. I don't want to get into it. But moving on to what I have in my rack over here, starting with 2 patch bays. Also a long story. I bought 1 patch bay, but it got wet when it was sent over here back when there were crazy floods in Valencia. Unfortunately, many bad things happened. One of the patch bays got a bit wet, which was one of the smaller problems in this situation, obviously. So Toman sent me another one, but this one also still worked. So I have 2 patch bays, which actually turned out nice because 1 patch bay is connected to my audio interface. So I can just kind of plug anything I want into any input and send any of the synthesizers into anything else. And then the second patch bay is connected and set up with the mixer. So if I want to work DAWless or something like that, or route whatever into the mixer to kind of distort things or color them up a bit, I can just go from one of the patch bays into the other, and everything is connected with the mixer. Also makes it very easy to send stuff into my external effects like the Electribe, which I could do within my interface also, but also depending on how I set everything up, I can send it, I can use the patch bay to patch things up quickly, which is nice. Then talking about the rack units. Of course, as I said, I want to save some space. Why? I don't see it necessary to have for every synthesizer a keyboard and controls and stuff like that. It seems like there might be some disadvantages for having rack units, because oftentimes they're kind of difficult to program. In the end, you just use the presets that they already have because they are so annoying to program in a way. But these days, since you have a computer and can get best of both worlds, you have many plugin editors for these tools because they can receive certain MIDI CC messages, and they were kind of built to be controlled by external gear, which in my case can be my different synthesizers, my different MIDI controllers, or just Ableton Live. So for example, if we go from top to bottom, this is my Emu Orbit 9090 Dance Planet. I don't have a big editor for that, but I built a little max patch myself, so I don't have to go down there to control the presets. I just made a little max patch where I have a preset browser. You can skip through the presets and banks and stuff like that, which is kind of useful. I could even map this to like a knob over here, so I can work completely over here, use the keyboard, skip the presets, do some editing, but the synthesizer that's being used is actually in my rack over here. So in a way, this setup over here is like one synthesizer which can trigger many different synthesizers over here. For example, also the TX81Z, I also bought an editor. So some presets are a bit quirky. You can edit them, fine tune them here. I really like FM synthesis, so this comes in really handy to me. Below the TX81Z, we have the JV2080, which is also like a classic Rompler. The expansion cards are super expensive to get, but I really like the drums on there and stuff like this, which I also trigger and connect with the machine drum. So once again, this is like doing so many things. So taking up a little bit of space, having the same workflow for many different sources, which I use drums from in the end. And the same with the other, like for the other tools, I got the JV20 because I got a good deal, and I found this editor which is also like a plugin. You can completely control it, map it to MIDI controllers, but then it's using your analog gear that you have in your rack. And speaking about analog versus digital, oftentimes just the way the presets are set up, if you sample it, or for example, there is a chord step on the Emu and you sample one of it, oftentimes the chord steps have like modulations and different effects, and the LFO is doing something. So the presets are often more complex than you might think. So it's not even just that analog, it sounds different because it's analog. Oftentimes the presets are just also kind of a bit nicer on these tools. So working with the JV2080 is nice. Making sounds from scratch is just so much easier when you have these plugins. So once again, I kind of try to save up some space and get best of both worlds, have an analog tool, but a digital way to control it. And then also outboard gear to kind of control the parameters of these tools. And then I have the Proteus 2000, which is also by Emu. Also many cool sounds on there. I also created a little preset skipper, Max for Live tool, to access the different presets. Also really nice drum sample bank, so I also trigger that with the Electron or sometimes with the Korg Electribe, which is also kind of a nice MIDI controller. So yeah, that was kind of my setup and the philosophy behind it. Kind of keep it nice and neat, but also have many options. In Ableton itself, you can come up with some workflows to connect everything quite nicely. As a MIDI interface, I'm using the MIDI phase 16 by 16. So every tool has its own MIDI port here. And then also I use a specific MIDI channel. Sometimes I mess things up in my projects, but I have a specific MIDI channel for most tools as well. So I know which MIDI channel I can use to just change the MIDI channel in here on the Electribe and trigger a specific thing I have in my rack. Same goes for my keyboard. If I turn this to MIDI channel 4, I immediately know, okay, that would be the microKORG, which obviously has its own keyboard, but I made some notes on every single tool to say which input it's using on my interface and which MIDI channel I would prefer to use for it. So this way I kind of stay organized. Lastly, for the Robotron Viper, with all these cool plugins that you have, and for example, the Arturia library or by UHE, Diva, and Repro, they're also really cool tools. And what's so special about this MIDI controller is that it's set up like the Prophet 5. So you can have a Prophet or Repro in your setup, and it comes with a Max for Live tool, which lets you immediately map everything. So usually it's difficult to MIDI map stuff and save that. But here, as you can see, if I twist this knob, it's automatically connected to the cutoff of this plugin, which automatically connects to the cutoff of my VSTs. I can even skip presets with these knobs. So I kind of have the plugins which I have inside of my computer all more or less well mapped on my keyboard and this controller over here. So in a way, this way I try to manage to get this big wall of synthesizers into one little setup, right? So you obviously don't need a setup like this to create great music, but it's kind of fun and also a hobby to get these things together. And as I said, like for my goal, it was kind of to have a setup which isn't too big, but can do lots of things. And for now, I think that's going well. Let's see a year from now what's new and maybe make a new video about that. But thanks for watching and looking forward to see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.